After my initial video that I showed you how I make my pie crusts, I've had a lot of people that wanted to know a little more detail. So here's a video with a little more detail. I start by adding 2 cups of all-purpose flour to a bowl and then a teaspoon of salt. I just take a fork, mix it around. It doesn't have to be super good, but somewhat good. And then there is a block, like a cup of Crisco. I take that pastry blender and I just kind of start twisting it around. The goal here is to get that Crisco mixed completely every single part of that bowl, because right now before you add the water is when you want to do all of your mixing. So I'm going to make sure that all that Crisco is mixed completely with every bit of flour that's in there. So I'm just taking from the bottom, moving to the top, and then I'm just taking that pastry blender and just making sure that there's no flour that doesn't have the same amount of that Crisco mixed within. Because in just a second, I'm going to add that water and then I want to mix as little as possible. And by mixing as little as possible, I'm going to get a very, very flaky crust. So like my brother will take this and he'll put it in his like mixer and do that. That makes me cringe. I don't do it that way. So see how it looks like it's pretty incorporated throughout? It's almost like little pea-sized Crisco balls in there. So now I'm taking the cold water. I really don't know the science behind why that water has to be cold, but I know that it has to be cold. So I put that water in here, and on this part, I didn't edit any of the video out. So you're seeing the amount of time, like the 30 seconds or so, that is all I mix. And I'm barely getting it with that pastry blender. I'm just making sure everything is touched with that water, clean off that pastry blender, and now I'm going to use my hands. And again, I'm pretty much just going to squish it into a ball because there's not, I just don't want to mix very much so that I will have a flaky crust. So this 2-cup recipe makes about 2 crusts, or it makes a top and a bottom. So now I'm going to split it in 2. I make one of those balls a little bit bigger than the other one just because I'm going to have leftover crust after I cut off the edge that I will then add to the other ball that was smaller. So they're split up. Now I'm going to take flour and I'm going to lightly put that flour on the surface. So the hardest part about making the crust is right here. You don't want your crust to stick to the countertop. So make sure that there's enough flour, but not too much, but enough flour so it doesn't stick. And you can kind of put your fingers under here right now and see, did it stick? I know that it didn't just because I've been making these for so long, but you don't want it to stick. So as long as it's not sticking, roll it out. And I roll it out to where it's about the size of the pie plate. I want probably an inch edge larger, maybe an inch and a half larger. And so I'm taking the pie plate upside down. I'm just measuring, is it big enough? And it's not quite big enough over on that left-hand side. So I'm just pulling that dough over there barely, and it's good now. So I'm taking that pie crust and I'm just going to flip it in half. Like I'm just going to fold it over in half. I know other people will put it over the rolling pin. I don't do that. I've tried it and it seems like I fail every time. And then I'm gently just sliding it onto the pie plate, and I put it about halfway, and then I'm going to unfold it the rest of the way. So now I'm just taking my fingers and I'm making sure that it is fit the whole curve of that pie plate. Now there's a couple spots on this crust that so you can see on that far side, it doesn't have it covered. So I just tore off a small piece on something that was over covered. And now I'm using my fingers to press it in place. Totally works because y'all are going to fill this up with pie filling. Nobody's ever going to see the inside. And they really do think I'm such a pie expert. I mean, I've been making these since I was little, but nobody can see the flaws. So don't worry about the little flaws that are going to happen because it will be covered up with the stuff that you put inside. So I just take a knife and I cut around the edges. Now that stuff right there that I'm picking up, I'm going to add that to the other pie crust, which is why I made those dough balls a different size. So now I'm just taking my thumb and my 2 fingers and I'm just making a pretty side. Some people will take like a fork and do it. This is my favorite way. I think it's the prettiest way to do it. Just do it how you like it. And I mean, this is about all there is to a pie crust. So as far as baking, I've had lots of questions on how long do I bake it? What do I do? All that kind of stuff. I really just follow the instructions of whatever I'm putting in it. So like if I'm making a cream pie, most cream pies need you to bake that pie crust beforehand, but the recipe is going to be with that cream pie. See how beautiful that looks? It turns out so nice. All right, so here is that second dough ball. Again, you don't want it to stick to your counter. And I've had lots of people comment of ways to have it not stick to your counter. I haven't tried those, so I'm not going to tell you about them until I actually try them and make sure they work. But again, I don't want it to stick to the counter, so I'm lightly covering it in flour, but you don't want too much flour. And then I'm just going to start rolling this out. And again, I'm going to roll it out, and I'm just following the same steps again. Roll it out until it's the right size of that pie plate. And I'm going to take that pie plate. Well, see, it's not quite circular, and so I'm just piecing it together there. It totally works. Taking that pie plate, and I'm making sure, is it wide enough? I can see over on that right-hand side, it needs a little bit more. And by just kind of stretching the dough a little bit, I achieved that. And now I'm going to take that dough, and I'm going to fold it in half. And as long as it doesn't stick to that counter, you're really good to go. A piece fell off, not a big deal. It kind of tore a little bit, not a big deal, because once you put it on the pie plate, you can fix that. So take that dough, fold it, kind of lift it up slightly, gently roll it to about halfway in the pie plate, unfold it, and then I know because it's the second one that has been used a little bit more, it doesn't stay together quite as well. Not a big deal, because again, your filling is going to cover up all those mistakes. And see how I just pieced it back together right there? And it works every time. So nobody sees those flaws, and it's okay to have them. So again, I'm just kind of piecing it there, making sure that every part of it is covered. And then I'm going to take that butter knife again and gently cut off the edges of it. And then I'm going to crinkle that edge just with my thumb and my forefinger. And then these little pieces of dough, I've heard you can bake them up. I don't really do anything. My husband likes to get into those and eat them, but I usually will just end up throwing that little bit of extra away. So here I'm taking my thumb and on my other hand, my thumb and my forefinger, and I'm just doing that crinkled edge. And I was telling you a minute ago about how I bake it. It really is just according to whatever I'm putting in it. So like if I'm doing a fruit pie, I don't typically bake it at all until I put the fruit in, but there's some that need you to par bake it. So it really just is up to whatever you are going to be putting into that filling. And comment below if there's anything that I didn't answer your questions to in this video.